there, and welcome to Frontiers of Innovation, a live LinkedIn initiative brought to you by Canon. I'm Eithne Treanor. I'm going to be your moderator for this session, and I'm absolutely delighted that you've taken the time to join us. Frontiers of Innovation is, of course, a creation by Canon, whereby we talk to leading experts from around the world, really looking at digitalization, creativity, really looking at what's going on in our world and how everything that's happening is impacting you. This week, we're going to talk about the future of work. And of course, we want you to be involved. Make sure you get your questions ready. We're on standby here, ready to actually talk to our guests and make sure that they will answer them for you. So the future of work, the Agile Workforce, it impacts every one of us. And we all know what it's been like for the last few months. So I'm really looking forward to talking to both of our guests. They are ladies who have very, very strong careers in the corporate world. They've written, they've been authors. They're both involved in organizational psychology. They know what's going on in the workforce. So I just want to introduce you to them. And please, Vanessa Tierney joins me now. She is the founder, co-founder, and chief executive officer of Abodoo. And Vanessa is joining us from Ireland. So thank you so much for joining us, Vanessa. And also I'm delighted from Turkey, from Istanbul right now. We're joined with İdil Türkmenoğlu, and she is an organizational consultant and an independent board member, but again, with that really strong years and years of organizational behavior in HR. And I'd like to start with you, İdil, if I can. And really, let's just look at what's been happening in the last few months. Really, the world has been turned upside down in many ways. And here we are all working from home in different countries. It's great that we're connected. It's great that we're together. But what do you think has been the biggest impact from COVID-19 on the Agile workforce and indeed the future of work and how we're managing it right now?
Thank you, Eithne. We were not ready for that, although we had a lot of contingency planning for everything, because it's a different crisis. It's a different crisis because it wasn't a financial one, a humanitarian one. It didn't started in, economical or places in offices, but it started on the street. It's not a recession, it's a complete disruption. So as people, humans, we were not ready for that. And that shock made us think about first our health and safety. So our first priority, just contrary to the other crisis, was not business continuity, just keeping our employees and our friends and family healthy. The companies took a lot of measures for that, and they mainly sent everyone back, even if they were not ready for remote work or whatever. And secondly, then purpose, the society came into the agenda, because people are on the streets fighting, and no one can think about the customer, the business, everything. And the companies, even CEOs, were like, what should we do for our purpose, for our society? Can we share our products? Can we share our production line? Or can we just donate? They were just scared, and there were some wrong decisions there too. Well, on top of that, after a few weeks, third, fourth week, I saw that business continuity was in place for the focus. But the thing is, even if you wanted to talk about business continuity from the very start, from the day one, employees and many CEOs, top management, was not ready for that. I have been to many EMEA meetings and many CEO workshops, and I saw these leaders were personally so scared, and they were thinking that they're just acting opportunistic. But normally this was relevant, and we had to convince, as organizational consultants, we had to convince some leaders, some employees, that what you're doing now is relevant. If you need to advertise, you need to advertise. Of course, I'm not talking about unethical, advertising or whatever, but for business continuity and for your consumers' health, customers' expectations. If you're an online business, online gaming business, of course you need to market, because everyone is at home and it's so relevant. It's not opportunistic. And I really had some really hard workshops trying to convince business people that, okay, we are safe, healthy, but this is your business to continue. And I couldn't believe my ears. Like, I'm an HR person and trying to convince that big leader to make him feel that this is not opportunistic. And secondly, they were not ready for regular management practices. They don't know how to manage from distance. Maybe we would go on to that.
Well, indeed, there's lots there to digest too. And Vanessa, perfect time to bring you into it when we're talking about, I think, the fear factor that was there. And again, when anything happens and anything so quick, so sudden like this, I mean, without a doubt, we all have known people who've been working from home, who've been working remotely for a while. But really, this COVID-19, this pandemic really put this, I suppose, on the highway, so to speak. The speed at which this happened and the speed at which companies had to adapt. What do you think they've learned, and how well do you think they've managed, Vanessa?
I think they've done incredibly well. I mean, we talk about the human leader today, and that's what they have to be. They have to lead with empathy, and they didn't get much notice at all, as Idil was saying. And you know, I've been remote for 10 years, and I've worked with companies in the last number of years, and a lot of them did not object to remote, but they just didn't feel remote ready. And it could have been multiple of reasons. We've talked about trust, technology, connectivity, systems, whatever it might be. There was barriers there. And most lead times, interestingly, was 9 to 12 months that would take them to actually implement a model. But we all did it so fast within 1 or 2 days. Now, my biggest fear is that we had to do it so fast, we haven't done it well. You know, anything that's going to have substance that can last and be sustainable for a long time, it needs proper modeling. And those companies that are actually realizing the potential slowly but surely, I mean, we're still in a pandemic. It's still, some companies are opening up, some offices are letting the workers back in, some are not. But those that are actually seeing the potential of remote, even if it's a percentage of the time, are beginning to realize, actually, let's look at our culture. Let's look at our working model. Let's define a new smart working model for whether we're in a pandemic or post-pandemic. And those businesses will thrive. They will make it through, because even pre-COVID, there were so many financial benefits that are associated with agile working, whether it's the productivity side or the saving or accessing diverse talent or whatever it might be. There's a lot of upsides, and they will start to come through as the year goes to the end, and they'll start to realize, actually, in 2021, let's relook at exactly what our model will be when this pandemic is over, because it will end.
Yes. And again, I think it's about taking stock at the moment, whereby this is right now, it's about survival, I think. So we will then have time to look back. And I think it's that uncertainty that's out there at the moment too, that has everybody running scared. Idil, talk to me about the trust factor, because again, we look at different cultures around the world, and we look at the region here, you know, the Middle East, North Africa, the region here that we cover, and particularly, you know, just around, it's different everywhere you go. But how can that trust factor be in place? And the fact that we also have a shifting of generations. We're going to talk about that a little bit too in a few minutes. But talk to me about trust and how important that is. And maybe that's where some people weren't very comfortable, perhaps giving up the power and giving up control to just let people get on with their jobs.
Yeah, you're totally right. Culture is put to test by this crisis. And it was a moment of truth for many companies and for many managers and leaders as well. You have a decision to make when you're managing a company or your department as your leadership style. You can choose to be a controlling person. You need to have regulations and checklists and etc., check-ins. But you can also create a context around the values, how we do business, our purpose. And then you go along with the tribe when you're managing that context. And the companies and leaders who have been managing until this time with control, checklists, and 9 to 5 and fingerprints and etc., they were really shocked. I see very, very, upsetting trials just to do it online too. Like, don't close your camera, don't shut down your camera. Just check in every morning and every evening. But these trust issues not only happened around this part of the world, but I've seen many articles in the United States regarding online mobbing and trust issues and etc. So this is a new concept to us, and trust issue was present during daily offline life too. But with this new type of working, we need to have this trust, either offline or online. And we need to give employees space, trust, and to create new ways of assessing, new ways of meetings. But let me tell you something, organizations are not ready. HR people are not ready. In Amazon, if we Google, we will find more than 10,000 books in English on how to manage virtually. And on top of that, if you Google career sites, which is, Vanessa's expertise, you will see that many companies, including consulting companies like Deloitte, etc., are looking for people, HR people, for flexible work, managing remote work, etc. There are a lot of lists of jobs, and it's like, they used to look for a compensation specialist, recruitment specialist. Now, workforce design and managing posts, you will see. Here are the 3 job postings I just read this morning. I will not tell the companies, but workforce transformation director, working for HR, or head of workforce enablement, agile transformation, or head of workforce transformation and human capital. These are brand new functions within the HR. So coming back to your question, yes, we need to invest in new kind of culture, trust, etc. But we don't have people to do that in the companies yet, in many companies.
Yes, I think we're in that time where we're in the transition, so to speak. So it's funny when we're trying to bring in people to manage the transition, and actually there's never been a transition like this. I think that's a bit funny. Vanessa, talk to me about, is this the big transition? I mean, are we in a situation whereby people have seen this, that it has worked? You're a great believer, obviously, and I think a good time to tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Abodoo. But, is this the future, or is there should still, I imagine, be room for maybe a bit of half and half, or maybe not quite half and half, but we'll see a bit of both. What do you think?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it's been one that's been asked for years, especially for the companies that are 100% remote, or those companies that were starting to bring in flexibility, because that is agile. As soon as you let people finish early on a Friday, or you do time sharing or desk sharing or whatever it might be. I mean, I don't think the world is ready for 100% remote. That would be really sad. If we all get to stay in our homes and work and have our careers and family, I'll go insane if I have to do it with kids all the time. But the reality is people do miss the office, they miss the social side. And I think the ultimate model is a mix where you do get to connect with your workers, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in the office. I've seen examples. There's a company in Ireland, originally from Canada, called Shopify, who don't have an office, but they do enable a co-working 1 day or 2 days a week for their teams to get together. That's a wonderful idea. I've heard of another organization in Dublin now that are allowing their workers come in 3 days a week and then 2 days from home, and then you rotate the following week. So I love the term smart working model, and that's not a name that you can off the shelf create one model and applies to every business. Every company, every culture, every product, every human that works for a company is different. And so the work transformation specialists that Idil was talking about, they're so important. This is not a C-level modeling. This is someone who really understands it. And there are very few specialists actually in the world who have been successfully leading remote. And it really requires the elements of what Idil does, the modeling, the research, but it's bringing everybody into the decision making. And I think what companies are going to realize as well is that the millennials that are coming through, they're going to make up 75% of the workforce in the next 5 years. They want flexibility. Over 70% of them say it's the number one thing on their list pre-COVID. Can you imagine post-COVID? So companies that really don't embrace this, they're just going to miss a trick and they're going to fall behind. Whereas they have the opportunity to build one of the strongest employer brands in their industry if they can nail it well.
Yes, I really think so. And Idil, when we look at the workforce at the moment too, I mean, we've got such a mixture still in the workforce. In many ways, we've probably got, 4 or 5 generations there. There's still a few that are in there, that were born before 1946. Then we've got the baby boomers between 46 and 64. Generation X is in there between 65 and 76. Generation Y, of course, they're there. And Generation Z is coming into the workforce. So how on earth do you actually bring everybody together and create some sense of harmony? Because ultimately that's what's needed as well.
Well, I have been in HR for more than 25 years. And in the beginning of my career, I was always in love with systems and procedures and, ERPs and distance stuff, whatever. But as you grow older, like I'm coming to 50, you see that it's totally simple. It's just think about them as really people with needs and create a constitution for the company. That's all. It's like a country, let's say. A company is like a country, and we will define with every people, not only because there are a lot of discrimination factors in the companies, as you know, it's not only the age, but gender, also other racial stuff. And even in countries like ours, if you haven't completed your military service, it's a way of discrimination. So I would go for a constitution for companies. That's actually, I'm working on that for the last 5-6 years. I go to the companies and I just get rid of all procedures and processes and discipline structures and etc. We write a constitution for the company, the way we do business, like Netflix does, freedom and responsibility culture. So we define the culture we want with people, and then just define the problem points, and we create the institutions to solve these problems. It's like a court, let's say, ethical board. So everyone is there, and there should be, I think, just 3 main rules in a company. 1, complete equality. 2, freedom of speech. And 3, of course, positive discrimination for the disadvantaged. So above all, others are really, really details. So I'm not a Generation Z, but I want what they want. So my voice is just one voice there. I would go for relaxing everything and just put the person in the middle. And as I describe HR, I say HR's only thing is just getting rid of the stuff which are banning the performance, which are in front of the performance. Just clean this area. Let it be remote work, let it be performance, let it be discrimination, whatever, just clear the space. The person just needs to focus on the performance and the job. And then you're happy, healthy, and productive. But there's one.
I think sometimes that's a lot easier said than done. If you can come in here, Vanessa, too, and we'll continue this conversation, but you look at, big corporations and you look at the matrix that's within a big corporation. Okay, we've seen a lot of the, new tech companies that have a very different style and a different attitude, and they absolutely are thriving. So people are looking at these models and wondering if they can bring them in. But what happens to office politics? What happens to, how people hire? Of course, they want more diversity, but they've wanted it for years and they haven't managed to put it in place. What are the big stumbling blocks, Vanessa, and what do companies really need to do, to adapt probably a more positive workforce, yes, as well as an agile one, but something a lot more rewarding for everybody?
The really important thing right now, I believe, while we're still going through this pandemic, is that we focus on the workers' capability dependent on their circumstance, because everybody is different. We're all experiencing a different lockdown. And I think the first thing leaders need to do is really be empathetic and understand, what can you do? Are you homeschooling at the same time as working, for example? Now, when the schools reopen, and that's a different situation. I feel like there's 2 working models that are needed right now. One to get through what we're all getting through together, and then one post-pandemic. But in terms of the major stumbling blocks, like up until this point in time, it has been trust, but that has slowly been addressed. And trust can be combated against with performance. And I can tell you, even with people having their children at home and there might be caring for older people, they are thriving with the empowerment, because that's one of the fundamental human needs, that sense of security, but also that you're enabled to just do your best. And as Adele was saying, it is about performance and achievement. And that's going to give confidence to the leaders. If there's any employees listening today, I'd be saying just focus on the job at hand. Whatever you agreed at the beginning of the quarter, just hit it and overachieve it, because that's how we prove that this model works. The other stumbling block has really been around, what do the workers want? What do the leadership want? What can the company facilitate? So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm sort of seeing companies now saying they're implementing 360 surveys now, and they're asking people what would they want post-pandemic, so they can work towards that. And then the final piece is technology. I mean, security is a big issue, especially if workers are on their own devices. Over 90% of mobile phones are actually not secured. So there's a huge piece that needs to be done there. But the shining light is this. I have seen pre-COVID-19 banks enabling a third of the workforce to go remote. In a million years, I never thought we'd see auditors and even law firms going remote. So these highly confidential, secure roles, if those companies are enabling this in certain markets, this can be applied to any market. It's just the know-how. So leaders just need to tap into the best practice and implement.
It is, and indeed, just last week we had cybersecurity, or the week before, talking about it with Quentin Taylor, who really put it into perspective in terms of actually getting that security right, which, you know, the big companies do in-house on a good day. So they just have to make sure they extend it further. Idil, talk to me about the opportunities that this can offer when we look at the workplace and we look at discrimination, perhaps against different members of the workforce, perhaps women getting back into the workforce, the fact that perhaps they can now work from home, that should open up the door for a lot more women to work, because there may have been jobs they wouldn't have been considered for before, maybe because very often still in most countries around the world, women still being the main caregiver when it comes to children and organizing the house and that. So that still is, whether we like it or not, despite the equality that we all talk about, that still is the case, you know, in many countries. So will this open opportunities, and do you think employers are ready and willing to offer those opportunities?
I do believe, and I will just talk a little bit more about this, but coming to that, there is a legal problem in many parts of the world. The law is not ready for many things. And the laws supporting women are actually not supporting them, putting them in home, like in the countries like ours. I can give you examples for that if needed. But remote working, for example, here in Turkey, was legally regulated for the very first time only 4 years ago in terms of contracting. And many companies are not, of course, but Vanessa, this is a great market, so everyone is ready. It's like everybody was just on site. Now we are going back to remote. But all rights and obligations arising out of the law remain the same for the remote worker right now. It's horrible in terms of employers. Because, for example, in practice, an accident or illness happening at home, where the remote worker can face while working, it will be deemed as occupational accidents and illness. And employer is obliged to inform, to give training, to provide health surveillance, and to take necessary occupational safety measures there at home in our law. For example, let's say an employee works from home, falls from the chair, or just goes to the kitchen to get some hot tea and spills the tea. They're all workplace hazards in law. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, but I can see what you're talking about, and it makes so much sense on things that we haven't even thought about, because there's certainly, you know, health and safety regulations sometimes in the workplace are a lot stricter than they are sometimes at home, and they should be probably equally as strict at home. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. But you're so right, and I think there's issues like this that people really need to be looking at above and beyond, you know, how they can look. But Vanessa, talk to me about also the access to work for a lot of people that might work remotely, and perhaps a little bit of some of the work that you're doing as well, in terms of making sure that, does everybody know where the pool of talent is? I don't really think they do. And sometimes we look at, you know, when people want to expand, when they want to open up, and they just advertise and hope that people will come and work. But I think there's probably a smarter way, and you've been working on that for a while now. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, we have. I mean, I think that a good example of like how to source talent online, it reflects the idea of the 9 to 5 box that you have to fit. A lot of the people online, they're actively looking fit that box. But what happens now if you are embracing agile working? It means that you can access amazing talent, not just in your country, but anywhere. And I'm so passionate about diverse talent and inclusion. Like, I've worked a lot with diversity leaders when it's already in the company. But the problem is there's so much unconscious bias in the recruitment process that, you could have the best diverse policy in the world, but you're not getting the diverse talent in. And this is critical now moving forward, because women do play, and I'm not just talking about male, female, I'm talking about diverse talent. It's proven to make businesses more profitable. So Abodoo, that we launched 2.5 years ago, comes from the name Abode Your Home and Do Being Work. It's a data intelligence platform where we enable people to register, it doesn't matter where they are in the world, with people registering in over 62 countries who want smart working, and they get to put in all the data points as to, this is what I'd love. I want to work in this region. I want to work from my home. I want to work from co-working. And this is what I'd like to earn if I have flexibility. And the interesting point is some people will be more flexible on what they'll earn if they can live outside of the city. And so all of this goes into the Abodoo platform, and companies can access, and this is a free ecosystem, by the way. There is no charge to the person or the business. They go up, they input all their data, and a match happens, like a dating website. But the beautiful thing is we do reduce unconscious bias because everybody is anonymous on the first match and the person is in control. And so that was something that we were really passionate about. And over the 2.5 years, we've seen thousands and thousands of people registering. We've a couple of hundred companies now on board. But something that we're doing now for government to help during this crisis is actually using the data that we're getting to talent heat map. Where is the talent outside of the cities, across regions? And this can support economic recovery, because if a region knows their skills, because skills is the number one asset, skills is what's going to get us through and get economies going again. And a region needs to know what their skill is. And so we're using the technology now to produce dynamic mapping that we can give to governments on a local level. And they can not only help the indigenous business connect with workers, but they can also attract foreign direct investment. And why that is important is San Francisco was, for example, the hot location for talent skills, but boy, did you pay for it. Average salary is over 200 to 250 a year. Now those companies can get that same skill anywhere. And so now regions, if they know their skills, they're going to be in a really, really strong position to not only just get through the pandemic, but thrive after.
And I can see, this concept of the talent mapping, how important this will be, particularly here in the Middle East region, and probably even would have, just such huge advantages for part of the refugee population. I mean, when you think of just people who can log into a system like this and let the world know their talent and let them know that they're available. I mean, it's something like this, I think, is just the possibilities are really endless. And again, I love the fact that you're saying it's almost like the blind choice. If you look at the talent that's there, you identify what you want, what you absolutely need, and you find a match for it. I mean, again, this must, are you seeing this working whereby, it is removing that perhaps unconscious bias? And Idil, I'll bring you in on this in a minute. But have you seen it work, Vanessa?
Yes. Yeah, there's a few things that we're observing with the mapping. The first is there's mass movement, by the way, happening in the world. That's something I will say. We're seeing a lot of people registering on Abodoo that they have been in one country, but they want to return home. And so they know by registering, they'll be part of a mapping for their home country, who, if they attract companies, not just to land, but it could be to hire remote workers, they'll be able to make that transition. And the beautiful thing is they could actually start that job while they're wherever they are right now, and then transition with security. But what we are seeing is trends on the company side. So initially they would put in mandatory experience, but now they're focused on skills. So the way we've built the platform is like, if you need 3 years cybersecurity skills, you put in 3 years, and you might get a graduate that's fresh out, 24 years old, or you might get someone who's 42, of a different sex, different race, different location. And we're starting to see companies opening up the bandwidth as to where they'll look. where they'll hire. And the feedback is they're quite surprised at the talent that's available outside of their country. They might not be ready to necessarily hire them yet for tax reasons, or as Idil was saying, the corporate policy is not in place yet. But certainly it's like they're opening the door to the sweet shop and they're going, wow, is this the potential if we embrace? And reversing migration is something we're so really wanting to get on top of, because if you have connectivity, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you have a skill and you have connectivity, actually, if you don't have a skill, you can get a skill because you have connectivity. And then the next thing is you should be able for opportunity. And with Abodoo, we make it an open platform so that you have a real equal opportunity to a career.
And this, of course, is worth for everybody to have a look on it. Idil, when we look at, and we go back a few years and everybody talked about the growth of the mega city, and we look at even a city like Istanbul, and just an absolutely fabulous but very populated city too. And then look at such a huge country, even like Turkey, and all of the regions that would love to have some investment and would love to have more work and more work opportunities. Do you see the concept, when adopted, if adopted, or rather, it's just hopefully when, that this will absolutely, open opportunities and perhaps cut back on this unconscious bias in terms of who shows up in the office and who fits into that team, the fact that they can probably work more and do just as good a job remotely?
Yeah, there are many questions in one question, but for your first question, yes, this really changed our view. Like I'm just criticizing myself as well. Like as a consultant, I had clients mostly in Istanbul, and I was like, I didn't want to travel to the Anatolia, this and that, and we would call. But since this pandemic, we started Zoom meetings. They got used to, Anatolian companies got used to that, and our client base just grew because we found out by trying that it works like that. So as the same thing happens for employees as well. They would like to leave Istanbul and go work for somewhere. But now they can work half-time from Istanbul with their, good life, clubbing and etc. and half-time in that, rural area. This creates a great variety. But as Vanessa put too, there are two main challenges. And I think this platform is really, really instrumental for that. And I find us like the support factors of that. Like we need to focus on connectivity from everywhere and also legal backgrounds from everywhere. And the platforms like this are normally policy making, actually. We are just not talking, just discussing. We're trying to show the policymakers, the big companies, try to show the way. And we had a lot of trainings during the COVID time in the region, and many people from Africa couldn't join because of the connectivity issues. So infrastructure and legally policy making are the two main must things are from now on. And coming back to your questions, there will be some kind of internal management issues, like they don't see me. What about my career? Stuff like that. Or that person was fighting with me, and now we are on the screen next to each other, and we haven't solved that. What's happening now? So in terms of managing the climate, not the culture, the climate, we definitely need some extra tools and types of assessment. The HR people need to be creative about that. But we have seen some legal suits coming up for discrimination, like I'm working remote and he's working on site. That's why he's promoting him. So I tell every HR person I know that don't rush for promotions, for benefits alignment, for compensation alignments, for recontracting. Just wait and see. Remember our discussion? We had this just forming, storming, norming, performing steps. COVID sent us home. Okay, we formed a new reality. Then there have been a lot of storms. Now we are slowly norming what we should do, who is remote, who's not, what are the benefits. And I'm telling all HR people, don't rush. You're just storming. Just wait and see.
And it'll all come back to performing at one point. It really will. And we have to remember, of course, that we're talking about human beings. So we're talking about emotion, and whether we're remotely, emotional, or if we're right beside each other, we have to really look at that. I have a few questions coming in. So Vanessa, let me get one to you here. Zakaria from Morocco is asking if remote working impact the company's budget positively or negatively? And again, according to the country's regulation and law on various things. But one other thing that you brought up there, which you were talking about, Vanessa, and saying it will be good when the CFO is looking at the costs and perhaps. But the real estate people are absolutely, they'll probably soon be up in arms, and they'll be very worried because real estate, in the city is prime property, and they want to make sure that the big offices are still buying and that they're actually, making sure that office space is still around. So where do you think, what will happen in terms of the longer term for companies?
Well, we've been working with companies, and we've done sort of a smart working calculator with them using global statistics. There's a lot of amazing surveys out there of the numbers we can expect, but just high level for the CFOs perhaps that are tuned in would be that you're going to experience, when normality comes back, normal production levels come back, anything from a 10 to 15% increase in productivity. There's lots of psychological reasons behind this, I think. It's not that necessarily people work longer, they tend to just work more effectively. Some people do say they find it difficult to turn off, but if you take that top level figure of 10%, then you're looking at an average saving in America experienced with those companies that go fully remote of $11,000 per employee per year. So you've got two multipliers, and then the final, and I think one of the most expensive costs to a business that very hard to control at times is attrition. And the average retention of a worker, certainly a millennial, tends to be 18 months. So 40% improvement in attrition. So if you pump all of those into a calculator, you start to see a net profit that is way beyond what you're experiencing now. The companies that make it work well for the long term, and I'll highlight the scenario of Yahoo a few years ago when Minister Samar took over and she reversed the policy. She brought everyone back to the office because it wasn't working. People were not working effectively from home in the mainstream. It was not implemented correctly. And IBM also did it, but they've U-turned again, and now obviously they're remote. So it's so important that this saving that is made by the organization in that first 2 or 3 years is implemented into the policy, the culture, the people, the training, the systems, the rewards, the benefits, the company get-togethers, because they'll become really important. And, you're right, HR can champion this transformation while they're waiting to hire the director of work transformation. This is amazing. Like, for someone in HR right now, like, you can shine. The CEO will be your best friend if you can make this work for everybody. And people want security. They want to know that their jobs are safe, and that, even if you can't return to the office for whatever reason, you have equality when it comes to career progression. And I think that's key.
Yes, indeed. And I think when we think about it, as much as we talk about the gig economy and that people still, want that security, and they want to know that they will get promoted and they can develop their own career path. We have from Islam Salama here in Egypt, and this one, Idil, I think you can certainly look at too, and, carrying on from what Vanessa has said there already, building on that. But do you think that we can measure employees' performance through online platforms that we're using today in terms of working from home? I think that's a concern that people are also having.
Yeah, we need to change our minds to measure the results, not the daily, time, or if you're a consultant or a legal advisor, you need to have a timesheet. I'm not talking about that. But besides that, we should focus on the results, not the process itself, but not like daily checks and etc. So this is one thing, as you mentioned earlier, very important output of trust. I will trust that person that he will give me that output in the given time of course, I will be walking hand in hand. Today, we were in another workshop and we said, what are the new competencies needed for COVID? And we said, more listening, more inquiring. Again, going back to the very, very primitive leadership lessons, because it's a new setup and I need to listen to my employees and talk more often and inquire, not question, just inquire more to finish that storming session to become a new form. And this is, again, very easy to sell, because in the countries like ours, Middle East, brain drain was a huge thing. People would go to Scotland for Google and etc. Now they don't have to. They're here with their families. They're both supporting local companies and also working for Google. And secondly, on the contrary to the brain drain, we can hunt talent from San Francisco right now. No one would come and, travel and live in Middle East. We are all living in Middle East. We know how beautiful this place is, but from, the very west, it looks scary. But now we see many, many professionals from Silicon Valley just serving our companies around the region. So these are great benefits. And as Vanessa put right, HR could be the hero of the century, this decade. But I'm so sorry, my observations in many big companies around this area, they are planning how to open up, 50% here, 70% in September, 90%. And maybe they say once a week we'll work from home. I'm like, just reset, reset workspace, reset. So we need more help from, Vanessa, like consultants as well, because people is like, going back to normal, their factory settings. We have changed beautifully, but this was not a compromise or a sacrifice. Please do not go back to factory settings.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about too is it's a great opportunity for companies to, I think, take a calculated risk, because it's been in a way, taken for them, and they have managed to survive this. And right now this could go on until the end of the year. So I think even though some companies are going back, I really do think there's a much more of an awareness out there. Vanessa, I have another question from you here, from George from Lebanon. Will the business trips that we so frequently go on, and the big conferences, I guess, and all of that, do you think they'll go away forever and they'll all be replaced by virtual meetings? I would say, God forbid. But what do you think in this?
Oh, I hope not. I mean, because it is so lovely to get together, isn't it? And just some of the greatest bonds I've made in my career to date are people I've met at events and different workshops. But if this is going to be the case for the next year and a half, I have experienced some amazing tools online. I'm part of a mastermind that I met these women. They're brilliant women. We're all around the world, and we met at a networking event online. And it was a bit like, I guess, someone having a first speed date. It's an awkward experience, but once you get through it, you realize the potential. I can go into any room virtually, meet people. I might not be able to shake their hand, but I can still have the same level of conversation and eye contact. And boy, is it efficient. You can speak to multiple people in an hour, and then you don't have a long commute or a journey home. I think there's a few things, there's three major things happening in the world right now. Obviously, we're talking about remote agile working. The second piece is sustainability and the environment, which has obviously been parked with COVID. But that will come back, because a lot of companies are facing huge carbon taxes. And when the CFO starts to consider carbon tax and they look at the footprint, because, every commuter, I'm from Ireland, and we have a relatively small population, and nearly 40% of our population are in their cars every day, which is crazy. And if you take 4.6 metric tons per car per year that's created, it's just madness. So, and diversity. So those three key things. But I think, going back to the cost expenses, I do think we're looking at far less travel. And I think the airlines, for sustainability and to keep themselves going, are going to put their prices up. It might even feel like the 80s again, It's a premium to fly somewhere.
Really, it is. Yes, indeed. That's what's, I think, happening at the moment too. Idil, talk to me on the same topic here. Do you think that, we're looking at, pulling back in terms of having as many meetings, as many conferences, all of that? I mean, do you think that people have seen a value in what has gone on? Or do you think, and we have to look back to it, other, not other pandemics, because they've been more regionalized. There hasn't been anything like this in our lifetime, but, other global crises whereby things were disrupted for a few months and then everything just went back to normal. I mean, where do you see this going?
I trust power of assembly. A sociological thing. People would like to come together. And even if it's online, it needs to be more organic. We'll come to that in a bit, but I also have a social enterprise on stage arts, and I was because it's totally gone now, right now, theater. But I was reading an article in Medium and about this power of assembly, and I was really shocked to hear that, to learn that after 9/11, just 2 days after 9/11, a Broadway show just premiered. So people would like to, go out, come together, socially interact at school too. In the university, we had surveys for the university students, and they really need this canteen to meet the girls. That's what they say. So I believe business travel will go down because it's really too much costs and time and hassle. Traveling is so hard after 9/11, for everyone. But the thing is, although it's going to go down, we will have some meetings, gatherings we should have. And I think these online meetings have to transform as well. We are not used to that too. Like we consult to some companies, they're making a day-long conferences in Zoom. It's nuts, You cannot stay more than 20 minutes to listen to something.
Designed for, no.
No. And I think at Eithne, it's a great business opportunity for you. You're a great moderator, and people need to have moderators and some not juicy, real sketches and, stuff like that, like an event. But event companies are dead right now. I think they should go into creative live events thing. Coming back to your question, yes, the travel will go down and the meetings will go down. But on the other hand, we advise companies to create more online social events right now, like birthday parties, 5 o'clock teas, celebrating something. But like everything else, it should be really authentic. I shouldn't be bored to be there. And I see some managers inviting everybody for a kind of celebration. And then he starts yelling, turn on your camera. This is the culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast again.
Indeed. I think that at the moment there's so much going on here, and we all need to be really taking advantage of what we can, I think, at this time too, because there's huge opportunities without a doubt in terms of this very transition that we see, and we see the parts of it that work so well without a doubt. Talk to me, Vanessa, just you mentioned very briefly there about also people looking at the skill set that people have for work. One thing I just noticed, and I know in the massive headlines that have been happening, particularly out of the US this week, it looks like there's a presidential executive order to really sort of remove the absolute necessity of having qualifications and degrees for a lot of jobs in the US at the moment. And this is something that the government is looking at in terms of the facts. And many companies have taken this step already, whereby they're not necessarily knocking at the university graduation doors looking for clients and looking for staff, rather looking for qualified people. They're actually going out there and looking at skill set now. Do you think that this is something that's beginning to happen a lot more? And I can imagine it should be very good for people as well.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled about this. When I started my career 20 years ago, I learned from a very good trainer that, the makeup of somebody is just a quarter experience, a quarter education, but it's a quarter on your personality and a quarter on your cognitive and behaviors. And most companies hone in on the experience and the education. I even till 5 years ago, when we'd be recruiting the team for opportunities, The degree was a requirement. It was mandatory. Some required an MBA, and you could interview the best candidates and they wouldn't get through. And interestingly now, and I think coming out of the States, something like 70 million people are excluded from jobs that they are actually skilled for, but they don't have that third level degree, which shocked me. We have tools, we have personality assessments, we have behavioral tools, cognitive tools, and we have super ways of measuring who someone is. Like, really, at the end of the day, if someone has the values and the skills, everything else can be trained. So the opportunity, and I think it's really important companies make this shift now, because we're looking at graduate unemployment skyrocketing. Especially from the States, we've got graduates carrying huge debts from their education. They need to secure employment. And so this is the time where companies really need to say, look, let's look at the skills. I've also heard of school leavers who are reconsidering starting college, because they're thinking, well, why would I start college now? I'm going to miss Freshers Week. I'm going to miss that whole college experience. And it's a really good point. Once again, these are people that can be trained up if they have the right values for your company. But it goes back to the company needs to start thinking differently. It needs to see the opportunity, and the idea that the focus now is, how do we open up the office? How do we get sprays for everyone's hands? You know, I heard today that there's an office in London and there's actually a guard on guard to see if anyone sneezes.
Wow.
Which is outrageous in a call center of 300 people.
Yeah, there's a few of those around here at the moment as well. But I mean, again, I suppose the big fear right now is that if people are going back to the office, that you don't want any one person to be the cause of other people getting ill and that. So, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think, I mean, extreme times call for extreme situations. Idil, talk to me too, and when I look around this region, and we look even here in the UAE and look at Dubai, and again, there are many jobs that you absolutely positively have to have a degree from. And there's no shifting in that, and it's almost a legal requirement. And in terms of the hiring process and the visa process and all of that, and you have to have that degree, you have to have it attested, so you have to show it as well. So it's not, it's without a doubt, it has to be there. And I would imagine in many areas and many companies in Turkey too. Are we beginning to see a shift in terms of skill assessment rather than just assessment on pure educational qualifications? And is that a good thing? Will that be, will it expand the workforce and hopefully how people work differently in the future?
Yeah, well, it depends on the country's economic background too. For example, in Turkey, 23% of university graduates are unemployed. So 23% of university graduates, it's too big. And so the employers use this as a just limitation of applicants. There are too many applicants everywhere. But on the other hand, talking about talent, Vanessa is very right. And wherever the talent is, you just go for it, and you don't care if he has a college degree or that or whatever. The hierarchies kill those people though. So the companies need to rethink with those, wanted HR people to transform the organizational network, the hierarchy to network. For example, if you're making a, year-end meeting, CEO and HR says, okay, managers and up, come to the meeting. This is so wrong because it's so hierarchy. My blockchain expert, Bitcoin expert, is just 25-year-old, 3 years experienced person there who's not a manager or director. So people are shifting to head of Bitcoin could be just supervisor, and head of HR could be a director. But I need to make everyone work as a team, as head ofs, not directors altogether, not managers. So corporate hierarchies should be redefined again. And it's so hard because now I'm telling you that I'm taking the benefits from the managers, for example. I'm not giving this car allowance anymore because this Bitcoin or blockchain expert guy is more valuable to the company. So, but company policy doesn't let me give a company car to a supervisor. So these are going to change in the next 2 years, really hard. Like we will get rid of hierarchies, which will hurt many people a lot because they worked really hard for that title for 25 years. And you're saying, yes, you're a director, but he has a chance to sit on this table too, because he's head of Agile, whatever. So we are going into a very exciting decade, I think, maybe 2 years in terms of, company management team, consultants, and HR people. And as you just really well put, it was such a good transformation time. It's not scary. Like digital transformation was done by COVID. Remote working transformation, flexible agile is done by COVID. So let's keep them. But we need very smart, very agile, very talented HR and culture leaders for that.
Indeed. And just in wrapping up, if I can stay with you, Idil, first, just when we look to the future, and what words of encouragement would you give to, you've given some of them there without a doubt, but to not just the HR people, because I think we have to see a huge mindset. I mean, we need more creative HR people without a doubt, but a lot of this too is around mindset. But leaving words of wisdom that you would advise companies to just pay attention to now, to make sure that they almost future-proof themselves and can be hugely successful companies with productive and happy workforce in the future. What would you say they need to be looking at right now and putting in place?
I would say, just don't be scared. I would change CEO's title to Chief Courage Officers, because nothing stays the same, like COVID taught us. We can do anything. Of course, we will take calculated risks, but we should go with the flow, I would say. But just if my HR team or finance team are not going on the flow, I would change them too, because it's a new mindset. It's a new way of thinking, living, and working, as Vanessa well put. So I would be saying, just go with the flow. Don't be scared. And a BCG report really supports me, encourages me, because they say in all of the industries during the crisis, 14% of the companies grow their top line and bottom line at the same time, even if it's the greatest crisis. So who are agile, quick, smart, and maverick will just grow.
And again, I think this is what everybody really has to look at. Vanessa, I'm leaving you a closing word on this. Again, as we look to the future and we look at the change that has been put in place, the change that we have absolutely had to react to because we've had no choice, I think people can see clearly that we can actually do that. But a few words from you in terms of advice out there to people in the workforce, be it management, be it new employees, be it people entering the workforce. What do you think they all need to be really cognizant of right now as we hope to build a much better future for the workers of our world?
I think that we are in the trenches right now, and we will be for the rest of the year. And what is going to get us out of the trenches is belief and collaboration, everyone working together, eliminating the hierarchy, whether you're, as Idil was saying, a CEO or a new employee. Embrace everybody, every generation in the workforce. Make sure everybody has a voice, even if you're not in the same office. Provide tools or means or channels that everyone has their say, and just clearly articulate the plans of the organization. Even if you're not sure, use the courage to say, we're not clear, but we're working on what that model is going to be. And as soon as we have it, we will share it with you, so you know what our intentions are. Because if people know that you have their interests at heart, there is most likely security, and remote is here to stay, even a percentage of the time, you will have the most loyal and highly productive workforce. And that's what you need as leaders to get through this pandemic.
It really is. And I think it's that absolute commitment and the persistence to make sure, and in many ways to go back to, the blank drawing page if need be. And it's a great time to do that. It's a great opportunity. I think a lot of things have been opened up, and management and leaders have to approach that with a greater sense of openness, a greater sense of urgency, agility. All of that comes into it, and they have to move fast, but they have to move. I think ultimately that's what I'm hearing from both of you. We have to leave it there. Thank you both so much for taking the time, for sharing your expertise and for sharing all of your great experience in terms of what you have learned along the way and in terms of what you're observing and seeing right now and the great hopes that we all have for the future, because we ultimately have to stay optimistic and hope. And we know there is a great future for work, whatever form it will be different, it will look different, but it's something that is so important to each and every one of us. And indeed, to all of our great viewers out there, thank you so much. Thanks for your questions. We didn't get them all in. I hope we managed to get some of them. But once again, to İdil and to Vanessa from all of the team here at Canon, a big thank you, and we'll see you all next week. And next week, we will have a focus on the future and an in-depth look at communication. So I think many of the themes, we're hearing them in many of our sessions, and many of them overlap, but of course they overlap because it really is, it's about our future. That's what it's all about, and really about the future of innovation as we head towards the frontiers of innovation. So from all of us at Canon, thank you so much for joining us.